Welcome, scum, to the 2015 mayoral Christmas message. Now, Christmas is a time for love and joy and presents and getting stuff you really don't like, but it's also a time for reflection, to look back at those we loved and lost. Like my old grandfather here, Horatio J. Burns, who is sadly not with us anymore, and my maternal grandfather, Colonel Gaddafi, who's loved and missed by all, particularly the British government. It is inevitable, of course, that I should seem a rather remote figure to most of you, a successor to the kings and queens of history, someone whose face may be familiar in films or on YouTube, but who never really touches your personal lives. But now, for a few minutes at least, I hope to invite you into the pleasant warmth of my own home this Christmas. This past June, I opened E3 and was the first games journalist to do so. I was immediately overwhelmed by the love and the warmth and the smell and the despair of my fellow games scum who rushed to greet me to say, "Steve, what about all those terrible videos you do and they're not quite as funny as you think?" And even though they were wrong and are still somewhere right now rotting in Dalston or somewhere equally awful, I'd like to send my love to most, but not all of them. By no stretch of the imagination can 2015 be described as a happy or peaceful or even virtuous year for video games. Arguments, disputes, petty squabbles, and natural disasters such as the Xbox One have helped to produce an atmosphere of tension and hostility the whole world round. E3, of course, was an unmitigated disaster, resembling even more than it had done in the past a sort of Disneyland for cunts. The games were poor, the keynotes were poor, the executives' clothing was so poor they owe the IMF money, and the poor people I met on the way to LA House were, well, poor. It has, indeed, been a somber year for video games, particularly those of the open world persuasion, many of which have launched buggier than Mothercare. Fallout 4, Just Cause 3, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, each launching with major issues, and each as overrated as the last. Then of course there was the Final Fantasy Remake announcement, which was welcomed with open arms, and the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter announcement, which was welcomed with open arms. And now, once we've seen the reality of them just a few short months later, we've been kicked up the arse and told to fuck off by the very people who wanted them in the first place. The whims of a bunch of idiots dictating what multi-billion-dollar corporations and Kickstarters from old luminaries do, and now what are we left with? A bunch of people saying, "This is not what I wanted," but it is what you wanted. You're just a fucking idiot. You want things from the past. You want addled, brainless nostalgia, and when you get it, what do? You complain. But Christmas, of course, is the time to come together, to settle our differences, and to work out what's best for mankind. And what's best is, of course, to sell your consoles, to remove that rubbish from your houses, because it is crap, and so are you. The ongoing sale of Xbox One was an example of the international scale of evil which has beset us in recent years. Attempts by ruthless people to impose their will on a peaceful majority. Nintendo too dominated the landscape this year, not by sales of course, but by the many sock puppets they employ, directly or indirectly, to go onto the internet and to G up every single game they release, no matter if it's good or is in fact just liquid human dog shit. The Wii U continues to be a disaster, and my heart goes out to all the families, particularly the children, who will have to suffer the cruelty and heartache and misery of receiving one of these wretched machines this Christmas. There was one bright spot amongst this terrible year for video games, however, and that was Konami, the world's greatest games publisher, who put out two of the best games of this generation in thoroughly unpleasant circumstances. Proving, if any proof was needed, that whipping your staff with bits of electrical cable, or tying them to radiators, or macing them to keep them awake, results in truly great art. Before I take my leave, it is customary to wish you good cheer, good tidings, and good luck in the new year. But I won't, because you are, after all, scum. And The Witcher 3 was wank. In the turbulence of this anxious and active world, many people are leading uneventful and lonely lives. To them, the many internet outrages they suffer every day, not real disaster, are the true enemy. And so it is this Christmas Day I want to send a special message of discouragement and bad cheer to those of you whose lot is cast in dull and unenvied surroundings, to those whose names will never be household words like mine. Finally, I'd like to address my friends and colleagues, particularly Jamie Trinker, who should now get up from that seat Turn that camera off and get the fuck out of my house.